How many times have you caught yourself stuck in the same loop? Different places, different faces, but somehow the same pain? It's like life keeps setting the stage for the same scene over and over again, no matter how hard you try to change the script. A relationship ends, and despite your efforts, the next one triggers the same fear of being left behind. At work, you find yourself self-sabotaging just as things begin to go right, as if some invisible force inside you whispers, "You're not ready," or worse, "You don't deserve this." And then there's the sudden heaviness that drops in your chest for no clear reason. The kind of sadness that doesn't make sense until you realize it smells like the past. Carl Jung once said that we do not respond to life as it is. We respond to it as we are, or more accurately, as we were. Most people live wearing psychological lenses painted by their pain. And those lenses don't show the world clearly. They reflect the past. That's why a late text back doesn't just irritate you. It ignites abandonment panic. That's why a gentle critique can feel like a public shaming. That's why the future feels scary, not because of what might go wrong, but because deep down, you're afraid of reliving what already did. Jung called this phenomenon projection, a word that sounds simple until you understand how much of your reality it can warp. Because when you don't process your past, you start seeing ghosts. You react not to people or situations, but to echoes. Echoes that dictate your every move while making you think you're in control. You might think you're choosing your path freely, but if your vision is still fogged by unresolved trauma, you're not choosing, you're reenacting. You're living with a past so loud it drowns out the present. To protect ourselves, we adapt. We build masks. Jung called them the persona. They keep us safe. They help us function. But sometimes they become our prison. Think about it. Have you ever become the strong one? Always calm, always in control. Not because you want to be, but because life taught you there was no room for your emotions? Or maybe you're the peacemaker, the one who avoids conflict at all costs, always smiling, always agreeable. But under that smile is a backlog of swallowed truths and suffocated frustration. That mask helped you survive, but now it's exhausting you. Jung didn't believe we should rip off the mask. That's reckless. But he insisted we must recognize when the mask is wearing us. When we confuse the role we perform with the person we are. What happens when you're so used to pretending to be okay that you forget what you actually feel? What happens when you're so used to being the reliable one that no one checks if you're okay? That's the price of unconscious living. We repeat patterns not because we enjoy pain, but because we haven't fully recognized the pain that's still steering us. Jung believed that the past doesn't go away just because time moves forward. The past becomes internalized, encoded, projected, until we see the present not as it is, but as we fear it to be. The boss who gives you feedback becomes your critical parent all over again. The partner who takes space becomes the friend who ghosted you back in high school. And when that happens, it's not just memory, it's possession. The present becomes a puppet stage, and the strings are pulled by emotions you haven't fully named. But here's the most important thing. What you don't see in yourself, you'll be forced to confront in others. That's why it hurts when someone gets attention. That's why it stings when someone sets boundaries. That's why rejection feels like annihilation. Not because the situation is brutal, but because your wound is still open. And yet there's hope, because what's been distorted can also be clarified. What's been projected can be reclaimed. Jung believed that healing begins the moment you ask, is this reaction really about now? Or is it a flashback I've mistaken for truth? Let's make it more real. Imagine someone who grew up constantly criticized, every mistake met with shame, every success ignored. Years pass. They leave home. They get a job. They start building a life. But when their manager corrects a detail, their stomach flips. Their mind spirals. They feel 10 years old again. Not because the correction was cruel, but because they never stopped hearing that old voice. You'll never be enough. That is projection, and it's not weakness. It's human. But if we're not aware of it, it controls us. The worst part? We often don't project just our fears. We project our hopes too. That's how people fall in love with fantasy, not reality. We think we found the one, but often we've just found someone onto whom we've cast every unmet need and unresolved dream. We don't love them. We love what they represent. Until the illusion breaks and the pain is double. The loss of them and the collapse of what we thought they were. Jung warned of this when he spoke about anima and animus, the inner, unconscious images of the masculine and feminine we all carry. They act like magnets, pulling us into intense connections that feel like destiny, but might actually be emotional reenactment. It sounds harsh, but it's freeing, because once you see that the world outside is echoing the world inside, you stop being a puppet and start becoming the author of your own experience. Projection is automatic, but awareness is intentional. The question is, are you willing to look inward before blaming outward? We also have to look at the persona again. The mask we wear to survive. It's not evil. It helps us navigate the world. But if we forget it's a mask, we end up performing life instead of living it. Ever met someone who's always upbeat, always the light in the room, but when they're alone, they're crumbling? That's persona. It's the high achiever who's terrified of slowing down, the people pleaser who's afraid of being called too much, the independent one who secretly dreams of being held, but can't admit it even to themselves. Behind every flawless persona is a scared, complex, longing human being. Jung wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." Read that again. It means most of us are interacting mask to mask. And when two masks fall in love, the real people often don't know each other at all. So how do we escape the trap? Not by discarding the persona, but by realizing when we're lost in it, by asking, am I reacting as my true self or the role I've been playing? By noticing, am I choosing this or am I defaulting to a pattern? Because the moment you can pause and ask those questions, you create space. And in that space, something rare happens. You wake up. When you pause long enough to ask, is this real or is this familiar? You begin to see the difference between what's happening now and what you're still carrying. Jung said the unconscious doesn't want to punish us. It wants to integrate. But if we keep pushing our pain into the dark, it doesn't disappear. It just chooses louder ways to be heard. It shows up in failed relationships, burnout, anxiety that doesn't match the moment, fear that comes out of nowhere. That's why transformation starts not with action, but with awareness. And awareness isn't flashy, it's subtle. It's the moment you realize your intense reaction isn't about what just happened. It's about what happened years ago. It's noticing that the fear in your chest doesn't belong to the current situation. It belongs to a younger version of you, one that never had the chance to speak. The goal isn't to eliminate all triggers. It's to recognize them for what they are. Signals that something inside you is still waiting to be understood. It's not easy work, but it's real work. And real change begins when you stop performing strength and start exploring your pain. Let's get practical. Jung wasn't about abstract theories. He believed in facing yourself. So how do you start? First, observe yourself without judgment. That means when something upsets you, don't rush to fix it or explain it away. Ask, why does this bother me so deeply? What does it remind me of? Is this about now or about then? Second, Write it down. Journaling isn't just a habit, it's a tool. It allows you to see your patterns over time. Some truths only reveal themselves when you read them in your own handwriting. Write about what triggered you today, what scared you, what surprised you. Then ask, what does this connect to from my past? Third, pay attention to the masks. When you walk into a room, do you switch into a role? Do you overcompensate, understate, or disappear entirely? Who would you be if you weren't performing anything? It's not about abandoning all social masks. It's about knowing when you're using one and when it's using you. Fourth, feel it. Not everything needs to be analyzed. Some wounds don't want language. They want acknowledgement. When you feel anger, don't repress it. When you feel sadness, don't numb it. Sit with it. Ask it what it wants, what memory it belongs to. Because often, the emotions that feel the most unbearable are just emotions we've tried the hardest to ignore. And fifth, don't do it alone. Jung believed that the unconscious reveals itself through relationships, not just with others, but with the right kind of witness. A therapist, a guide, a space where you can be fully seen without performance. Sometimes healing isn't found in understanding more. It's in being allowed to exist without defense. The truth is, healing won't always feel good. Sometimes it will feel like losing your identity, like losing relationships that only worked because you were playing a part, like facing truths you spent years avoiding, but that's not failure. That's what real growth looks like. When your old self starts crumbling to make space for who you were always meant to be. And this is the part no one talks about. The cost of becoming real. It costs comfort. It costs approval. It costs certainty. But what you gain is worth it. Clarity, depth, authenticity. The ability to finally respond to life as it is, not as you fear it to be. You stop seeing threats where there are none. You stop chasing people who remind you of past pain. You stop overreacting to minor things because your nervous system no longer thinks it's under attack. You start seeing people as they are, not through the film of your projections. And maybe most importantly, you start seeing yourself, not the version you had to become, not the mask you learned to wear, but the raw, powerful, capable person underneath all of it. The one who's been buried beneath performance, pain, and expectation. So let me ask you something. What part of you have you been hiding because someone once told you it was too much? What have you been suppressing, not because it's wrong, but because it wasn't safe to feel? What would your life look like if you stopped reacting to your past and started responding to your present? You're not stuck because you're broken. You're stuck because a part of you is still waiting for permission to be seen. So give it. That's the real work Jung was pointing us toward. Not just thinking differently, but seeing differently. Looking at your life and realizing that half of what you thought were external problems were really reflections of your internal battle. You are not your projections. You are not your past roles. You are not the sum of other people's opinions. You are the one with the power to stop the cycle, to remove the lenses, to meet life with your full self, not just the version built for survival. Freedom doesn't come from forgetting the past. It comes from recognizing when it's no longer in charge. The moment you stop reacting like the wounded child, the abandoned teen, the silenced adult, and start responding like someone who sees it all but chooses consciously, that's the moment you reclaim your life. That's when the loops start to break. That's when people stop defining you. That's when your history becomes a story, not a sentence. So if this spoke to something inside you, that quiet voice that always knew you were meant for more than repetition, stay with this work. Stay curious. Stay aware. Because this isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. You deserve that freedom. and it starts now.